Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fifth event. In this event, we're going to cover this: how we get 4 times more output for a client in 29 days. Now, again, this particular case, we got 4 times more output. The lowest that we've had is 2.7 times more output, and our current record, we're talking about projects here. Our current record is getting projects, late running projects, delivered on time about 94% of the time. And again, let's look at the history here. The most late project we've seen is about 9 to 10 months running late, and we managed to get that back on track. So when I talk about output, we're talking about output related to projects. So I'm going to do 2 things in this particular session. One, I'm going to tell you what we found, and I'm going to tell you about the most important element of changing any system, which is how to study that system. So I'm going to tell you what we found. Second, I'm going to tell you what we did. And third, I'm going to tell you what results that we got. And then there's going to be an opportunity for you to get all our latest documents and systems free of charge to walk you through step by step how to do this. Now, again, as we did the last one, questions, comments, anything like that, put it into the comments. Whilst I can't respond in the comments, what I can do is I can read them and I'll respond to them as we go. So don't wait till the end, just put them right into the comments now. So let's get going. So there are 3 questions in any system that you have to think about when trying to change. Number 1 is what to change, what are you going to change that thing to, and third is how to cause the change. So we're going to talk about these 3 elements today. Now again, what we're talking about here is a big, late running project. I'm going to walk you through exactly what we did. Now, one important thing to say is that none of this data is from the actual client. So whilst what we saw is all real stuff, in essence, what we've done is we've taken that stuff from all our learnings, so that don't think that we would ever share actual data from a client, but it's the same kind of stuff that we see over and over again. So the first thing to change, the first thing we do is to think about when we walk into a late running project is we're going to start to study it. Now, by study, what do I mean? I mean, we're actually going to go and look at the ways of working in the project so that we can understand how they're working today. And I'm going to walk you through that first of all. So what's the first thing that we do in any project? Is what we do is we walk through the project portfolio. Because what I want to understand is I want to understand how much multitasking is going on potentially within and across this project, and how much of the resources are shared with other projects. So here's a kind of example of, first of all, we get the client's workflow, we lay that workflow out, and what we do is we take each of their projects and we put a post-it note with the project name into where it is sitting in the workflow. Now, the other things that we do here is we capture a rough idea of how long that project was supposed to be. Second, we capture roughly what the remaining duration is. And thirdly, what number of days that they've actually already been working on the project. So we can get a rough idea straight away as to how long has the project been in flight for, how long it should have taken, what is the remaining duration. We also capture on the post-it note who's working on this. So straight away, even though we're only focusing on one project, we can start to understand the thinking and the ways of working around the portfolio. So here's what we generally see if we're going to label how the portfolio is managed. Number one, what we see is multiple priority rules attached to the portfolio, meaning that projects are constantly taken from where they are in the process, in the system, and they are taken out and they're put back in. The order in which people are working on them changes. So you get massive multitasking across the portfolio. And again, if you turn that into a rule, what you say is it's okay to multitask across the portfolio. That's the way of working. Second thing that we find is generally resources are shared across projects, across a portfolio. So again, if we're looking at either problems at a portfolio level or in an individual project, straight away that we can see you've got priorities changing all the time. Secondly, what you can see is you've got shared resources across the project and the portfolio. Thus, that is absolutely going to be slowing you down. And you know, we did this with a client recently back in October. And before we even got to the next piece of the analysis, the client said, stop there. All we're going to do is we're going to freeze some of the projects in our current portfolio. We're going to limit the amount of multitasking being done. That's good enough for us today. So for many clients, just fixing how the portfolio works is a big thing. Second thing we look at is project scoping. Now, again, what we find with this client, what we generally find with most clients is this. Scoping is done by the wrong people, meaning it's typically done by the project manager. So the project manager has been asked to define what the outcomes are, or somebody who's not the leader has been asked to go and identify what things should be built. The problem then is you then get a scope document that's created, and that document is then circulated around people. And what we then do is we then, and I'll walk you through this later, we then bring everybody concerned in a late running project into a room. And we ask them to verbalize certain things, like describe the outcome of the project in terms of what will we see when it's done. In this case, or in cases like this, we see outcomes like this. Provide a structured process system for a new line of work. When we ask people to describe what they'll physically see, the answer is they don't know. So the challenge we have in project scoping generally is it's done by the wrong people. It's done in the wrong method, which is written communication rather than verbal. And thirdly, the way that it's communicated is using highly technical language over big, massive documents, as opposed to describing what will actually be seen. So think about the challenges so far. We've got a portfolio that has multiple priority rules. We have projects and resources that are being shared across projects. When people look at the scoping document, there's a lack of clarity around what needs to be built, the purpose of it, and what they'll actually see when it's done. So when they take that document and start to break it down into the plan, straight away you've got a problem, because you've got the wrong people who are now going to build the plan with a lack of clarity as to what should be in that particular plan. Again, if you've got any questions, drop them into the comments. Planning. Now, whilst scoping generally is not done well, we've been studying projects now for about 20 years. And this is the first area that really things start to go off the rails. And when we're studying how planning is done, we get the people in a room and we literally build a little process map of how you plan projects. What we generally find is, number one, it's done remotely. In other words, the PM or the planning department or whatever does a bit of a rough plan as to the big bits of work and the sequence in which those things should be done in. As such, what we find is that sizing is wrong, outcomes are wrong, dependencies are wrong, and also what we often have within the planning piece is we have some key milestones and dates, which if you know anything about our work over the years in terms of systems thinking applied to projects, what you see is due dates causing this thing called student syndrome, which is I won't start it until the last minute, or Parkinson's law, which is I'm going to expand the work to fit the time. And again, often some people are asked to submit their thoughts on what the plan should look like, but only on some of the, the main elements, not all of them. And what you then see is estimations about the size and the sequence are done by the wrong people. They're baked in, and before you know it, you now have a leader saying, this is when we have to have these things done, this is when they will be done, and your plan is completely and utterly wrong. And again, I'm going to talk to you about essentially how to do this right. All I'm talking about here is really how to study the planning process, which is essentially we get the people in the room and we say, walk through who does this bit, who does that bit, how long does this thing take, what does the plan look like, what does your dependencies look like, how are the outcomes described. We've put all of this into a document for you to have at the end of this session that walks through in detail how to do this. Next thing we study is we look at the amount of the size of the work put into the plan. Now, again, mostly what we see now, even in big programmatic type work, is lots of stories being built. And what we find is generally in a large, even if it's a large agile program, hundreds and hundreds of stories having been built for the next 6, 9, 12 months. And often these stories are very, very small, 1 hour or 1 to 2 days. And what you have is hundreds of stories planned out till the end of the project, rarely, if ever, in the right order. And that's going to cause you 2 problems. Number one, the plan is built way too far in advance, and you can't get any degree of certainty about what you're going to be doing 3, 4, 5 months from now, never mind building stories for 6, 7, 8 months in the future. And also with so many small stories planned out, if there's a change of direction, you're going to spend a lot of time planning. So not only do you have a plan that's built by the wrong people, what you then have is masses and masses of over planning with all of these bits of work sitting in backlog. Now, if you ask the question, what's the purpose of planning? Well, the purpose of planning is to support good execution. So when we go into execution, especially if we're looking at an agile environment, where, and again, what we see now is lots and lots of agile constructs applied to projects and programs. And again, these are not the actual client numbers. These are numbers that we took from lots of different clients. What we do when we study is, especially if we're looking at an agile system, we say, okay, let's take the last 7 to 10 sprints. Let's see how many things you said you were going to do versus how many things that you did do. Also, let's have a look at whether or not the things that you did do were the right things related to your plan. And also we look at the size in terms of the size of those things. And the other thing that we look at if we're looking at agile or sprint related work is at the end of the sprint, if you didn't do all the things that you should have done, did the right things that were left go into the next sprint? So here's what we generally find, and here's an example of the kind of things that we find. Number of story points or days of work attempted versus the number completed. And what we see here is that, hundreds of story points attempted on average, kind of 20 to 60, versus the number that were actually completed, about 7 to about 30, kind of in a good day. The second thing that we find, and we find this over agile teams over and over again, is that at the end of a sprint, what happens is that Whatever's left goes back into the backlog, and another set of stories are pulled forward. The third thing that we find is that 9 times out of 10, the stories that are being worked on are not the ones that they should be working on related to the plan. So you have a loss of capacity in a number of different areas. Number one, people working on the wrong thing at the wrong time. Number two, you have a situation whereby at the end of that sprint, if things are not completed, arbitrarily things are pulled in. As such, again, they're working on the wrong thing at the wrong time. And when someone is blocked, what we see time and time again is a situation whereby they put that thing down, they jump onto something else, send off an email to say I'm blocked, and again, we're working on the wrong thing at the wrong time. Now, if we look at the similar thing in a project, it's the same thing. We say, right, let's look at the big bits of work that you should be working on. Let's look at the tasks that people are working on. And what we start to do is say, okay, how many tasks should you have done in that block of work? How many tasks did you do? What we also look at in execution is the number of tasks that somebody has allocated to them. And what we find is time and time again when we do this exercise is people have 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10 tasks allocated to them. So again, what we're seeing is multitasking across projects, multitasking within projects, and we're also seeing a situation whereby people are working on the wrong things at the wrong time. When you combine all of that together, is it any wonder that projects are running late? Because the majority of time, whether it's a program, whether it's a project, whether it's product-related work, whether it's an agile system, projects get delivered by working on the right task at the right time. I don't care what you call it. 9 times out of 10, if people are working on the wrong thing at the wrong time, whether it's in an agile system, a Scrum-based system, a Kanban-based system, a Kanban, they're less likely to be doing that particular thing, or whether it's a true program or project, working on the wrong thing at the wrong time, combined with multitasking, is what's going to make you late. I recently had a conversation with someone who said to me, you know, too low level, you don't deliver a project one task at a time. Well, how do you deliver a project then? If it's not being done at the task level, how is that project being delivered? So as I say, in summary, half the team are working on other projects. When they're blocked, there's no process for unblocking and constant interruption. And as I say, what you have is a situation where teams have BAU activities as well as their current thing that they're working on, and also they're in a situation whereby not only they're working on a task plus BAU, but they have multiple tasks from which they can choose from. So when we go on to study, these are all the things that we're looking at. How does the portfolio work? How is scoping done? What's the method by which planning is done? How many things have you done in the time frame you said you were going to do them in? Are you working on the right time? What's the cycle time of those things? How many pieces of work has somebody been allocated? And it allows us to build a picture of current ways of working. And as I say, what we generally find is we then go round and we do a little piece of research, and we ask people, what is the priority rule for the thing that you're working on? In other words, if you've got 3 things in front of you, what is the rule to help you understand which thing to do first? And the least amount of priority rules we find for a portfolio or a project or task level is 6. The most that we found is 24, which means there is no real prioritization methodology, and people are constantly multitasking. In fact, it's been baked in to the project. So we do this as a qualitative piece of research. And then we do a study on measurement, and again, qualitative. We ask the team, do you know when this thing should be done? Firstly, what we generally find is that actually often people don't know when it should be done. When we ask them how far ahead or behind or on track are you, generally then we get different views from different teams depending on, you know, which bit of the project they're working on. And the other thing that people tell us is generally what they're able to tell us is roughly what the percentage complete is. When we actually build out the plan and we put in the rough estimates and we understand the critical chain methodology and what's remaining, is it doesn't bear any relation to what's actually what the time is really going to take, because the percentage complete, what we find time and time again is that the percentage complete in someone's mind may be 60, 70%, but what's happened because of the ways of working on the ground, we've done all the easy stuff and the difficult stuff gets left to the end. The other thing that we find is a common way of measurement is this qualitative thing which says, quick ring around, how are you doing, are you on track, and it's a weekly or a fortnightly update. Now again, conversation with a leader recently who said, no point giving me a daily update because actually I only want to know once a fortnight. Well, if what you're doing is you're working in blocks of work that are 20 to 30 days per block, which is what we'd recommend, then actually, if you're not finding out about a problem until you're 10 days in, you've potentially blown half your project block of work duration, it being blocked and nobody knowing about it. So this notion of weekly, fortnightly updates, frankly, is not going to be helpful if you really have to have something delivered on time. And as I say, we ask the question, what's your process for blocked work? 20 years of researching this, what we found is that generally there's a bit of a kind of rough process, but it's never an effective process. It's somebody putting something down, sending off an email, jumping onto something else, and as such, people are now working on the wrong things at the wrong time. And I'm probably going to get a lot of grief about this one, but the big challenge for me in using Scrum in a due date-based project is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to take bits of work and put them into an arbitrary 10 days of a time frame. In all the studies we've seen, time and time again, we see work being pushed into this arbitrary time box that fits the 10 days, rather than bits of work that need to be done, or things that are put into that time box that fits the skills and knowledge that you have for that time box, rather than the right work being put into the right time frame of work. So whilst there is a big case for working in shorter time blocks, and I massively support that, just going for an arbitrary 10 days is not really a helpful way to think about how to deliver a project. So what did we do differently? So we've done our research. Again, if you want the research document, if you want the ways of doing the research, because that's the key, knowing what to change, tell you how to get that at the end. What did we do differently? First of all, scoping. We want scoping to be done via a conversation, not via a written document. Of course, you can have written documents to support your conversation, and we want to make sure that there are wireframes where there's anything that you want to see physically. But what we do is we get the stakeholders in a room and we ask them to write out on some post-it notes the purpose of the thing, the customer, and the outcomes. And what we find time and time again is that actually there's complete misalignment on those three things. We also get them to start to use language that everyone can understand, which is, what will you physically see when this thing is delivered? Now, having got clarity of scope. And by the way, that can take maybe a day. Sometimes it can take a couple of days just to get everybody agreed on what is it we're going to see, whether it's 6 weeks from now in a kind of agile type system, in a more iterative product team based delivery, or whether it's 6 to 9 months from now in a project. We still want to know physically what will we see. Second thing we do at scoping is we walk through the methodology that will be used to deliver the project, the rules for that methodology, and again at the end we'll give you a copy of our brochure that walks through old ways of working or wrong ways of working, better ways of working, so you can understand what I mean by these rules. And we also want to be clear on the roles required to deliver the project. Particularly, we want to be clear on the person that's going to do task management and the person that's going to do unblocking. We found that 32% of the projects we've studied over the years, the late delivery, 32% of the time, is attributed to leaders not unblocking fast enough. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to get planning right. So we're going to get the people who are going to do the build in a room, and we're going to get them to build things using a kind of common construct. Number one, we're going to take that end objective, which we built in scope, and we're going to break that down into chunks or blocks of work in the sequence in which we're going to do the build. And again, each one, we find that about 15 to 25 days is about the right size, but it might be bigger, it might be smaller. We just simply because as humans, we tend to work in kind of month type cycles, and we want to be crossing things off, but we're not going for an arbitrary number of 10 days. We're going for roughly 15 to 25, maybe up to 30. We want each one described as visually, what will we see? We want to make sure that there are no floating blocks of work. Everything is connected so that we can understand that we've got things in the right sequence. And we do a thing called a sufficiency check, which is constantly checking if we have this and this and this and this, will we get the thing that we want so that we have no missing content. So, if often what happens when we go to a project, and we always get called in, because this is what we do, we get called into the late running projects. People are halfway through and we have to do a bit of planning. And the big challenge is people often don't know what is missing in the plan, because the plan generally is not that great. So therefore what we do is, once we've got the scope clear and everybody's clear on that, is we do a thing called obstacle-based planning. And what we ask them is, what are the things that you've got a rough feeling about is missing from the current plan, and what are the things that we know we have obstacles over? So we capture intuitively what people believe are missing between now and the point that it needs to be delivered, and where they know they have obstacles. We turn those into objectives, again, where this clear visual outcome, 15 to 25 days. And then what we do is we put these objectives kind of into, we just put them, we use a Visio document or we use Miro, and we just get the objectives out. And then what we do is we start to sequence them. And what we're doing here is we're making sure that we've got the right set of dependencies. And what we also have is where we can do parallel activities without resource contention, and anything in red is where we know we have something missing that we need to upgrade before we can start to build anything. And again, this is all grayed out so that there's no sensitive information being relayed. Now, what we now have is we now have a plan with the right work needing to be done in the right order. We can now therefore make sure that nobody's working on a big block of work that they should not be working on. So we're making sure that we're not arbitrarily working across the project. we can understand what our internal and our external dependencies are, and roughly rough sizing. The reason we want rough sizing is we don't want people working to due dates, so that we can benefit from early finishes, and that will aggregate against where we potentially have a little bit of a late finish. Also, you'll notice that this is not done in a Gantt chart, because a Gantt chart is a very, very poor way of building a plan. This is done in a network diagram. As I say, we use Visio, Miro, or we just use a big wall with lots of post-it notes in it. The benefit as you start to complete these blocks is you can just cross them off. So leadership can see very quickly what's being worked on and what's done and what's remaining. Then we get into execution. Now, this is really where, in my opinion, the magic really starts to happen. Because what we do is we take each one of these big blocks and we break it down to smaller chunks of work, smaller tasks or stories, whatever you want to call it. We have a sizing convention here about 3 to 5 days. And again, we want them in the right sequence, because we want people working on the right thing at the right time. Each team member is only allowed to work on one piece of work at a time, and it must be the right work at the right sequence. And we have a task manager making sure that no one is working on anything that they shouldn't be working on related to the task, and also that everybody has everything needed, not just to start the task, but also to finish their task. And also what we have in execution is we have a clear unblocking process, and we make sure that when somebody is blocked, they stop, they let the next person in the process know that they're blocked, and they don't do anything until either they are unblocked or someone says, okay, this is going to take us a week, 2 weeks. But what we keep them doing is we keep them working on the block of work that the team is working on. We do not let them work on anything further ahead, because we want them to make sure that they're working on the right things at the right time. So no capacity is lost by working on the wrong things at the wrong time. Then what we do is every single day we produce a fever chart, a daily update. And what this daily update does is the fever chart is related only to the block of work that we are working on. We used to do it for the whole project, but what we found is it didn't give sufficient urgency to the team to make sure that they maintained their focus, and urgency to leaders to unblock. Time and time again, I found with projects over the years that the project is running late. You ask what people are working on, they're working on the wrong things, or they haven't even worked on the project for 2 to 3 weeks. So the key here is focus. And what we do is we take these little tasks, and every day we ask a question. What's the remaining duration of the task that you've been given? Forget about the number of rough days that we had on the task, just what is the remaining duration? We aggregate that remaining duration up. And if it starts to consume, so when we're planning out the big blocks, we get 2 rough estimates, a rough estimate, safe estimate, ambitious estimate. In between the 2, we call that our buffer. So when we take our tasks, what happens is if a task goes way over the rough estimate of the task, we start to consume buffer. So what happens is every single day, a note goes out saying this is where we are, whether or not we've consumed buffer, what the exact recovery actions are, who's working on what, so there's absolute clarity that nobody should be working on the wrong thing. And this is the secret sauce that gets everybody on the same page, everybody working on the right thing, and where there is something running late, the exact actions required by the exact person to get it back on track. This is the magic. If you're working to 1 to 2 week updates based on opinion, you're missing out on a massive opportunity to get your projects delivered faster, more work out the door, or get your projects delivered on time. So again, because we're only handing out one task at a time, we're trying to eliminate multitasking. Because we've already sequenced the work in the big blocks, we already have a priority system in place. And we have leaders checking and saying, what are you working on? Are people working on the right block at the right time? And that task is related to that particular block. We don't allow people to work further ahead. Now, here's a big criticism. Big criticism from many people. They'll say to us, but you know, our people, that means that they miss out on variety. They're not getting to work on the things that they want to work on. So again, the variety argument is really a moot point, actually, because there should be more than sufficient variety for people to work on. That isn't the argument. People should not, however, be working on the things they want to work on, because as humans, it means we're going to choose the easy things and we're going to be working on the wrong things. So we must work on the right things at the right time. Again, let's look at the psychology here. What we want is people getting a sense of completion, knowing that if they get that sense of completion, they're going to get that dopamine rush that makes them feel good about completing things. So this whole system is about focus and completion, not about working on potentially the things that you fancy working on. And as I say, measurement is going to be done daily. When we release that fever chart, what we do is we annotate it with all the reasons why something went into the yellow. In other words, consumed buffer, into the red, consumed more buffer, so that people know exactly what they need to do to get that project back on track. We've done a lot of research in this area, actually. And what we found when we're doing a research about why is a project running late, we look at change requests. And we see two big things in change requests. In other words, why do we need to change the date of the project? Reason number one is too much complexity. Well, that's not a reason. Reason number two is we don't have enough resource. People constantly go back to these two things when actually, when we look at the specifics are typically somebody's working on the wrong thing at the wrong time. An external resource hasn't delivered the thing that they should have delivered. Maybe there's an environment blockage, or maybe there's a lack of clarity around requirements. Either way, what this tool will tell you is exactly what actions you need to take and you need leaders to support you with to get you back on track. In other words, we're not moving the due date. We're saying you're already starting to run late. To recover it, you need to take these actions. Blocked work, we designed and implemented an escalation process with clear roles and areas of accountability on who will do what, which meant we get unblocked faster. And we removed the arbitrary 10-day sprint and replaced it with the block of work and put a fever chart against that, which was equal to the size of the epic that the team was working on. Anything 15, 25, 30 days. We had one that was, we often go up, 35 days sometimes if we have to. But again, it's not arbitrary. It's related to the thing that needs to be delivered in that block. Now, again, what does the intervention design look like? What I mean by that is, how are we going to design this thing to make sure that we're not just delivering something and walking away and people go, what did we do? So we install a whole system. And what we do is we typically work alongside internal consultants or project managers to teach them how to do this. And we give them the whole system step by step. And then for future big interventions, we'll do a lighter touch as the consultants get more capable. So what do we get? Well, in this particular case, again, no sensitive information, we found that the team in this case actually got 4 times more work out the door in the time frame that they had, in the previous similar time frames, and now know exactly what needs to be done to get this project done early and now the project is starting to run again on track. We found with other ones, 9 months running late, got that delivered early. Another one, we got 2.7 times more out the door in an agile system than they were getting before. Another one, we halved the cost, by meaning that because they were getting double the work done in the same time, what they were able to do was let go a lot of the external resource that they'd taken on, and they were able to go with their own internal resource. So hundreds and thousands of pounds changed by working on the right things at the right time and getting more things out the door, and more importantly, giving absolute confidence as to when the thing will be delivered, whether it's 4 or 5 weeks from now, whether it's 4 or 5 months from now. Current state of play, as I say, the project is well on track now. And again, this is our whole blueprint. So the way that we work is, what we do is we take each of these things and we give you all the templates and all the methodologies, and typically we'll have this installed for you in about 30 days. So we install this system on a project, and we give you templates, we give you checklists, we give you handouts, we give you the 𝗪𝗺𝗟𝗑 tool, which is owned by me, was bought by me many years ago, and we've done lots of enhancements to that. We've built an activity tracker that gives you cycle times, continuous flow diagrams. You get all of these things, as well as our methodology for how to do each step. So we'll teach you how to study a system to make sure, study a market or study an operation to get the right outcomes. We'll teach you how to do scoping. We'll teach your teams how to do project planning, who to have in the room. We'll set you up with task management and execution systems. We'll give you a 𝗪𝗺𝗟𝗑 system. We'll show you how to then start to, where problems are occurring, where people are getting blocked, we'll teach you how to aggregate those and start to work on one problem at a time, so that you're eradicating those for future projects. We'll teach you, and we'll give you all the templates for process confirmation, which is how to make sure that the ways of working stick. We will give you then leadership training, so that leaders know how to think, what to do, what not to do. We'll show you how to manage a portfolio, and we'll also set you up with a weekly cadence. A lot of these things are in the book that I wrote, that you can get at 𝗪𝗺𝗑𝗫.co.uk. If you just go to my LinkedIn link tree, the book is in there. It's in my profile. And likewise, what we've made available for this session is, I've written a scoping document, how to do scoping. I've given you a data capture document that sits alongside the scoping document, and we've also made available to you our accelerated project system brochure that walks you through all of that. In that brochure, there's a link that you can book a call, and we'll walk you through a demo of all of the elements of our system. Now, if you email our creative director, which is Sim, S-I-M, at 𝗪𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏consulting.co.uk, Sim at 𝗪𝗚𝗏𝗏consulting.co.uk, she will return all of these documents to you. If you also want a copy of the Fragile book, we'll give you the link for that, and that's all free as part of you turning up for the seminar today. So we've not had any questions. I'm going to stay on for a minute if anybody has a question or has a comment. But again, this is a whole system from scoping right through to that weekly cadence that we turn up. We teach you how to understand and study what to change to, and we also teach you how to cause that change, which is how to take leaders and teams on the journey with you. If you want the demo, email Sim, she'll send you the documents, book a call, and we'll walk you through that demo of how the whole system works in more detail. I've had no questions, so I'll say thank you very much for those of you that did turn up today. We had about 80 people booked. As ever, what tends to happen is 70 to 80 people book, and we get about 20% show up rate. So we'll see what happens at the end of it. If you want any more, please email Sim and she will get you all the documents. Thank you very much. David, thanks very much for your comments. From my experience, this works. That's right, because we did some of this together. And again, the thing I want to stress is, it doesn't matter whether you're agile, product team based, scrum based, project based, portfolio based, it doesn't matter, because the key is in how you manage the tasks, working on the right thing at the right time. David, great to see you. Hope you're well, my friend, and hope to see you again soon. All the best.